Hello, welcome back to the GB3 Championship here at Snetterton for rounds 10, 11 and 12. So far this championship very, very close. Yoel Groundforce is your championship leader by 1 point over Luke Browning so far. And well, we're here at Snetterton. We've already had qualifying. Callum Voisin, who's 5th in the championship, he is on pole position for the first race, obviously winning the first race last time out at Donington as well. And Piers Pryor, our expert and driver, you've been telling me that here at Snetterton the wind is a big factor, and today specifically there's quite a breeze.
Absolutely. Snetterton almost always has a wind. It's a very flat area, open. The wind really comes across the fields, and it very much affects how these cars feel. We've got big wings on the cars, front wings, rear wings, the sides of the wings, they take a lot of the wind, and it really affects how the car feels. If you get a tailwind, you get a lot of oversteer, it can feel unstable. Headwind in the car really grips a lot more, so you can carry a lot more speed, and especially turn 1, the long straight down to turn 1. If you've got a headwind, you can go almost flat run turn 1 in these GB3 cars, I think potentially flat in qualifying on the new tyres. Tailwind, and it completely changed how the circuit feels. It's a very technical circuit this. You've got some really fast corners. We've mentioned turn 1. We've also got turn 5 Hamilton in the middle of the middle sector, and then the last sector with the Bomhole and Coram completely flat. But then you've also got some really slow corners. You've got Agostini hairpin, you've got Oggies as well. These are really technical corners where you have to get the car set up for both the high speed and the low speed. Should make some good overtaking with the 2 long straights, both the start and finish straight and the Brundle straight down towards the Brundle chicane. So hopefully some good racing. Qualifying will be very important because the middle sector is very narrow as well. So in the middle sector, overtaking may be a bit more tricky. Callum Voisin will be very happy with pole position. He's at really fast. He managed the car very well in the wind. But Browning and Groundforce are right up there in qualifying for the championship fight as well.
Absolutely they are, and we know that these drivers are fearless. But in terms of, you know, a lot of these drivers have come in, like Kean Shields, for example, you know, was doing karting last September. How much confidence will they have when they hit different types of wind? Because I know I'm going back to the wind here and I'm fascinated by it, but, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, if I'm an inexperienced driver and I'm going towards, you know, some wind I'm not expecting, and, you know, you lose it a little bit, is that going to really dent your confidence in terms of, you know, hitting it that hard again, and is it going to throw you in the race?
Yeah, definitely. The wind is something that you don't really get affected with in karting, whether that's because the circuits are a bit more enclosed or you're not going as fast and they're generally just not as big and you haven't got the downforce. In cars, it's something you really have to learn. I learned that here when I was testing here one day. We went here one day and it was a headwind turn 1. Turn 1 was flat. I came back, I think a few weeks later, and it was tailwind, and turn 1 was pretty much break down 1 gear. And it's amazing how much difference it makes, and something you have to really think about. You'll talk to your engineers, they'll have weather stations, they'll say, right, the wind has changed by this much, the wind's picked up. Gusts as well. We've seen at Barcelona in the Formula 1 that it caught out both Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz, so that shows how much that even the Formula 1 drivers can get caught out if the wind changes. The Formula 3 drivers, just the same, they need to be considering that. It's not just the wind as well. You've got the slipstream, you've got the aero wash you get at the front wings. There's a lot of fast corners. If you're too close, that can affect how the car handles. So there's a lot to think, and that's why these drivers come to this championship, because you need to learn these things as you move up the series, and they'll get experience from this and take it forward in their careers.
Well, just in a second, we're going to see a lap around this track so we can see what it's like from the driver's perspective. But first of all, we've talked about all the corners. Well, Piers has talked about all the corners. Let's see them written down on a map with Lewis McGlade explaining this track here at Snetterton.
Well, to Norfolk and to Snetterton as we race our way down to the Snetterton 300 circuit. Another one of these circuits that was built in the early 50s as a slew of old Air Force bases were turned into racetracks. This one of the longest of them, at 3 miles long, really is a tricky circuit, deceptively tricky. In fact, it's fairly flat all the way around its run, but it has the odd bump, the odd bit of undulation, and very, very tricky corners, divided up into the 3 sectors, all of which having great overtaking opportunities, down into the Montreal hairpin, into Agostini, and hey, even into the Brundle Nelson complex at the end of the Bentley Straight. So much racing can happen around Snetterton.
So that's a bit more about where we're racing today here at Snetterton in Norfolk, and Callum Voisin has gone round and got himself pole position in the Carlin. How is it out there today?
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely quick this morning. I don't know what happened. I mean, it's just, I think we had a little bit of rain overnight, and definitely it's a lot cooler compared to the previous 2 days, and I mean, I'm really happy, but it definitely wasn't really expected. Yesterday we struggled a little bit on 1 lap pace, but yeah, I managed to string it together in qualifying.
Okay. Piers has got a question about wind. We were just talking about wind there, and it's quite an important factor at this track, Piers.
Yeah, it's very windy today, and the wind's been changing throughout testing, but how did you find the wind affected the car in quali, and how did you overcome that?
To be honest, today the car was really stable. I mean, I think the wind, it was the same direction as yesterday, but on Thursday we had a little bit of kind of a tailwind into turn 1, so it was definitely a little bit more sketchy through there, but definitely that meant that today was a lot more stable, and definitely picked up some confidence in that way, but no, I mean it definitely changes a lot in terms of how much speed you can carry through the high speed corners.
Well, it's a great day so far for you. Pole position for this race, 5th for race 2 tomorrow. So that's how Callum's got on.
So let's ride on board with our second place in the championship, Luke Browning here around the Snetterton 300 circuit. Long run into Riches, the first corner, almost flat, some teams potentially flat through turn 1. A small lift for Luke on this lap, keeping it pinned on the exit. The wind affects the car through there, as we've been hearing from Callum Voisin. Heavy braking into the Wilson or Montreal hairpin. Very wide entry to allow a straighter exit to get a good run into turn 3 of Palmer. Tricky corner this, very technical. You have to carry a lot of speed in, slightly banked on the exit. Watch the track limits on the exit as well, because there's a sensor there. If you touch that, your lap will be deleted. We now head to the very tight Agostini, heavy on the brakes once again. You'll notice we go a little bit wide at the first apex, then cut back for the second. Traction very important there. Watch the curb on the exit. Car will bottom out. Then very technical section here. Hamilton nearly flat. Watch the tyres on the inside, and then braking is bumpy into Oggies. This exit is very important, very tricky. The car moves around a lot, using all the road on the left hand side to open up Williams onto the long Bentley straight. This is a very important exit here. We'll mind the curb on the exit. Another sensor there. Now a moment, 790 metres. Very fast here, over 225 kilometres an hour in under the bridge through Brundle and Nelson. This braking zone, very tricky, braking and turning. Get it in early, over the curb, stay left to open up Nelson of the right hand side. Mind the massive sausage curb on the inside. Now we're going to be completely flat until the final corner here, flat through the bomb hole. Big undulation change there, if you've ever seen that in real life. Then completely flat through Coram. It's very tricky to spot your braking point here. We bleed off the throttle onto the brakes. It's very hard to keep the car under control there, and then a strong exit to finish off our lap through Murray's, the last corner, as we then can finalise our lap. And now, after we finish this, let's head over and see how the last round went at Donington Park.
Highlights then from round 7 of the GB3 Championship as the first race of the weekend at Donington Park would get underway. Joel Grandforce, the Swede, would lead from pole position, with Matthew Reese, the Welshman, trying to get around the outside at Redgate. He'd be fully on the attack but wouldn't be able to muscle his way past the race leader. Alex Connor would run a little bit too deep in the first corner, trying to keep Max Esterson at bay. Unfortunately, he'd drop a couple of positions from that, but our race leaders will be going side by side down the hill through the crane. A little bit too much curb from Matthew Reese. He'd drop back in line behind Joel Grandforce with an eye up a move at the next available opportunity. Everyone would go a bit single file in the background as Headley would take a little bit too much grass on the exit of the old hairpin. Matthew Reese would go around the outside going into McLean. There'd be contact between the two, and Joel Grandforce would be sent spinning in front of the path of everyone else. Big bit of air from Luke Browning, who'd be into the barrier and out of the race, as well as further issues ahead from Nico Christodoulou and Javier Segura. Another look at that spin from Grandforce. You could see the suspension just pulled straight off of the rear left, and the top two in the championship would be out of the race. Matthew Reese, though, would still be in the race, and he'd be instantly on the attack, trying to recover his way back up the field, straight down the inside of the Fortec driver of Zach Taylor. Another look at the issues for Javier Segura as he'd retire the car from the race, along with Joel Grandforce and Luke Browning. Bit of an issue coming through the Fogarty S from John Bennett. He'd managed to get himself back going again, but would lose a whole heap of track position and drop down to the rear of the field. And Callum Voisin would take over the race lead, leading comfortably from his teammate Roberto Farrier. Retirement from Nick Gilks after suspension failure post car contact, and Brandon Oxley was defending for the final position inside the top 10 from Marcus Flack and from Bryce Aaron. He'd managed to keep that all the way to the checkered flag, which Callum Voisin would greet first to make it a Carlin 1-2 just ahead of his teammate Roberto Farrier, and so things were very happy in the Carlin camp. And then of course Max Esterson coming across the line with a well-deserved third place. And as we went into the 8th race of the season, it was Max Esterson starting from pole position. A really bad start from Alex Connor, who dropped right back down the order. A great one, though, from Callum Voisin, who was already on the attack, keeping Joel Grandforce at bay, trying to get around the outside of Max Esterson. And it was also Luke Browning who'd managed to outstart his championship rival and was up into 3rd position. Callum Voisin was looking for 2 for 2 from the weekend as he'd try and get all the way around the outside of Max Esterson going into the old hairpin. He'd run a little bit too wide and into the grass, and he'd lose out once again to Luke Browning. Matthew Reese was back on the attack once again, trying to get past Callum Voisin, who was still trying to recover himself, and Nico Christodoulou would lose out to Mackenzie Cresswell. And of course, Christodoulou making his first race appearance this weekend. James Headley would skip over the chicane after taking a little bit too much curb going through the first part of it, and then Alex Connor was straight down the inside of Javier Segura, nearly locking up and tapping the inside. Callum Voisin was not done with issues at the old hairpin, as he'd run a little bit too deep, skip over the grass, and he'd lose the position to Matthew Reese. Whilst that was happening, Mikael Grundtvig was trying to hang on from Tommy Smith. A bit of side-by-side action between them through the chicane would allow Nick Gilks to potentially find his way past. Zach Taylor was trying to get past the high-tech duo of Bryce Aaron and Cian Shields, whilst their teammate was trying to attack for the race lead. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be enough for Luke Browning, because Max Snetterton would come across the line to take his first win at the GB3 Championship. And the final race of the weekend would be underway with a race towards Redgate once more. This time it was Bryce Aaron starting from pole position alongside Mikael Grundtvig, could have a poor start from the front row of the grid, dropping all the way back to 4th position, allowing Brandon Oxley and Tommy Smith to take over the podium positions. It was side by side up the hill towards McLean's. Everyone was trying to get single file, finding their track position, but very difficult indeed. The top 5 would get single file, and then everyone would fight over 6th place. Zach Taylor pushing David Morales out wide, allowing Javier Segura to slot the gap and make it 3 wide on the start-finish straight. Roberto Faria would be into the pit lane after lap 1 issues. Speaking of issues, Tom Leben was having a couple coming over the rise at Coppice. He'd managed to flick the car back the right way, but would rejoin the race at the back of the field. A couple of laps into the race and everyone was getting single file as they were all trying to have a bit of a breather around Donington Park, and Luke Browning was able to work his way up past his championship rival of Yoel Gramforce and was able to hold a point advantage, at least in this race. Headley was making a move straight down the inside, trying to find his way past Dave Morales, who was able to hang on. And of course, when you don't make a move, you have to look backwards, and that is exactly what Headley had to do. Cian Shields was coming past, but as Shields was trying to make that move, he'd break his front wing. Callum Voisin was able to get past, and then the front wing was ripped off once Matthew Reese had made his move. And of course, a swift return to the pit lane for Cian Shields. Speaking of returns to pit lane, this one for the 77 of David Morales, front wing ripped off on that run into turn 1, and he would have to come to a stop. But out of the final corner, Bryce Aaron would take his first win in the GB3 Championship. Well, Donington was fantastic, and of course this one would be indeed. Let's see what we've got in store for us here at the legendary Snetterton. Our first running in the 2022 GB3 Championship around the Snetterton 300 circuit, and it is indeed Callum Voisin on pole position. Had a fantastic round last time out at Donington Park with the race victory in that first race there, as well as obviously challenging for the race lead in the second race there in round 8 of the championship. But this one is round 10, and of course once we're done with here in Snetterton tomorrow afternoon, we will be halfway through the season. And what a fantastic season it's been. Our championship leaders after 9 races separated by just a single point. It is absolutely madness out there. There is your pole sitter, Callum Voisin. Took it in the final moments of that qualifying session, took it by over 1/10 of a second as well. It was absolutely superb at the top of the qualifying session throughout. It was I think about halfway through the session, 5 of the cars were separated by just over 1/10 of a second. It was incredibly close. The top 3 were separated by just 1/100th of a second, and then Callum Voisin absolutely smashed it on the final lap of the session, taking pole position ahead of Yoel Gramforce. And the 2 championship rivals will start from 2nd and 3rd. You can see Luke Browning there in the 3rd position, and then of course Matthew Reese in 4th. We'll take a look at the grid order in a moment, don't you panic. But obviously it is important to note that Matthew Reese and Yoel Gramforce did make contact on that race start back in Donington Park, of course the first race of the weekend that time by. There is a hole on the grid between Mackenzie Cresswell and Brandon Oxley. That is Nick Gilks. I think they're just getting into position for the final moment. It's being wheeled back into spot. That's James Headley, who didn't have a great qualifying session in the black and yellow car on the right. Not 100% sure as to why Nick Gilks is not on the grid. Had a great qualifying session, by his standards. Ended up in 13th position in the qualifying session after it being a PB run in qualifying. So we'll have to catch up as to why Nick Gilks is not on the grid presently, and whether he'll be joining the race at least to some degree from the back. If he isn't able to rejoin into that 13th spot, all the Nick Gilks fans that we do know watch the GB3 Championship, don't panic too much, because his personal best qualifying will be on tomorrow in the opening race of the day. He'll start from 11th position, which is his best qualifying. I'm just curious as to why he's missing from it. We'll wait for them to begin their formation lap before we get going and racing once more. And like I say, it's been a fantastic season thus far. Luke Browning's taken a whole heap of victories in the form of just 2. I know it's not exactly the whole list of heaps, but he's had plenty of podiums with it. The championship standings as we head into this: Yoel Grandforce 168 points after that race victory in Silverstone, and also a few pole positions to his name, leads by just a single point over Luke Browning. Max Snetterton getting himself involved in the mix courtesy of a fantastic Donington Park round. Doesn't quite have the pace this weekend to match that form, but up in 3rd position of the championship. Then Roberto Faria and Callum Voisin. Watch out for Voisin, because he has found some speed in that Carlin right there. Down the order, a couple of drivers obviously to keep an eye out for. Zach Taylor's not done too well in qualifying, but has certainly marched his way up the order. Could actually go very well tomorrow afternoon. Brandon Oxley had a decent round last time out as well. And watch out for Nico Christodoulou, 22nd in the championship and the number 22, of course, has recently joined the GB3 Championship in the previous round of the season. However, I will say this round qualifying has been absolutely spot on from Christodoulou, who will start this race from 10th position, and then tomorrow's race will start from 7th. So for Christodoulou, the Canadian, to join the championship and to already be firing on those kind of results from qualifying, that is fantastic. Struggled a little bit in the previous round. As we can see, James Headley is being pushed back into the pit lane. So clearly the dramas that they were having within the Elite Motorsports team do indeed continue for the number 67. So we might actually be missing 2 cars on this 22 car grid. Very curious as to how that one's going to play out. But either way, to talk you through the race, of course, myself, Lewis McGlade, Pierce Pryor has managed to work his way back over to the commentary booth. Hello there, good sir.
Hello, welcome. Hello everyone, how are we doing?
Yeah, we are good. I mean, so we've got 2 cars missing from the grid. Obviously, you've just got into the commentary booth, so I'll talk you through it once more. Nick Gilks is missing from the grid from 13th position, and we've just recently had James Headley as well pulled off the grid from 18th position. Curious as to why these kind of things happen.
Yeah, they've been sitting on the grid a while, haven't they? Is that due to the... Sorry, I've done some rallycross around the outside.
Yes, no, I've seen.
I had to do some rallycross around the outside of Coram to get here, because unfortunately, not unlike Donington, where I can do my sprints, it's a bit too far.
Max Maserati watching on, just in the, you can kind of see him there in the racing suit, in the white and green there on the sort of left-hand side of the shot. So clearly watching. That is up on the inside of turn 1. So good effort, as we've got plenty of crowds of people watching. But yeah, it's I don't know exactly as to what the issues have been. We finally do get ourselves moving, but those 2 cars being delayed, they are going to start in pit lane. You can see James Headley working his way to the end of pit lane there. Yep. Nick Gilks is still missing as far as I am aware.
That's really disappointing for Nick. I know he was very much looking forward to the race. We spoke to him just after qualifying, John and I, and he was very happy. His best qualifying of the season so far, moving his way up the grid, and yeah, very disappointed for him to not make the grid.
Well, Callum Voisin will start from pole position. It's the 4th different pole sitter of 2022, and Yoel Grandforce will start in 2nd place alongside. Then we've got Luke Browning and Matthew Reese starting on the 2nd row of the grid. Of course, Browning just a single point behind in the championship challenge. Matthew Reese finding some fantastic form this weekend. Maybe not too pleased with how qualifying went, was really expecting some of those pole position challenges. Roberto Faria in 5th position with Tom Leben, the highest placed Elite Motorsports team that of course are local to this circuit. They're based in Thetford. Alex Connors continuing his great qualifying form with a 3rd consecutive top 10 qualifying with John Bennett alongside the driver who started off the season in the most consistent form with the longest streak of top 10s in 2022 so far. Javier Segura in 9th position after issues in the start of the qualifying session, with Nico Christodoulou in 10th place, except that he's been finding his form in the championship. Max Snetterton had a great round last time at Donington Park, but has struggled a little bit with pace around here. Brandon Oxley will start alongside in 12th place, looking for yet another top 10 finish in the season. Nick Gilks was slated to start from 13th. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Mackenzie Cresswell for Chris Dittman Racing starting a row behind his teammate. Bryce Aaron will start from 15th place, as David Morales make it an All-American row 8 for the Arden Motorsports team. Tommy Smith from 17th. James Headley, questions will start from the pit lane in the Elite Motorsports car, the final of the trio that they have. And then Marcus Flack, Zach Taylor for Vortex, seeming to struggle just a little bit around here, because Kean Shields and then Zach Taylor's teammate of Mikael Grundtvig starting from 22nd. I will say now though, all of the drivers were well within the 103% rule, so at least there is that to look forward to on Sunday afternoon. But focusing on today, it's a tight grid, it's a tricky circuit. It's going to be a tough one out there.
Absolutely. It's very, very close in qualifying. We were watching the qualifying times, and at parts, top 4, 5 separated by less than a tenth of a second, which was crazy. Callum Voisin put in an excellent lap on the last lap. A lot of people improving on the last lap. I heard rumours that the wind might have died down and there was some tow going, you know, people towing each other around, which helped them improve on the last lap. But look at Joel Granfuss right out the back of Callum Voisin, ready to go. It's hopefully to extend his championship lead, only 1 point ahead of Luke Browning.
It is incredibly tight, and when you've got that kind of championship pressure, I mean, talks like how do you kind of deal with that? Do you kind of just put it out of your mind and just focus on the race at hand, or is it always going to be there?
I think it depends on the driver, but generally most people go with take it a race at a time. We're still only at the sort of the halfway point of the season as it stands, so roughly halfway. Don't think exactly, but
not quite yet.
Not quite.
End of this weekend we are.
End of this weekend we'll be halfway, so we're not even halfway. So the championship at this stage, while important, is not the main focus. It's to get this weekend out of the way, get as many points from each weekend as possible. We've seen how the DNFs can affect the championship fight so strongly, so all the drivers will be concentrating on making sure that they are finishing all the races where they should be.
Well, Douglas Motorsports have been working their way back into the Championship Challenge courtesy of Max Esterson's fantastic run last time out, and of course that retirement, the double retirement for Luke Browning and Joel Granfors does mean that Esterson's moving up in the Championship Challenge. But there's one driver that I'm really focused on right now is actually Callum Voisin, who obviously is starting this race from pole position. He's 5th in the championship, and realistically speaking is only 36 points behind, so he's still well within it. They're going to line themselves up on the grid. Again, a reminder that James Headley and Nick Gilks are both missing from this grid. That is a driver that was supposed to start from 13th position in Nick Gilks, and then Headley's 18th position. So we are missing 2 cars on the grid. Hopefully they'll both start their way from pit lane, but we are about to get underway in round number 10 of the GB3 Championship, partnered by the BRDC, as we get ourselves racing once more here at Snetterton, and the 350-metre run down towards Riches in the first corner is on. Good start from Joel Granfors, but a great one from Luke Browning. Look at that from 3rd position. He's already got alongside as they race their way down to turn 1. Luke Browning straight up into 2nd position. Side by side, John Bennett looks to the inside, going through the first corner of Riches, as we are absolutely committed all the way pinned through the first corner, straight into the second of the Wilson hairpin, and Joel Granfors is able to at least hang on to 3rd.
Yep, Reese looking very racy behind Granfors as well. You saw Granfors knew he had a bad start, shot straight across the front of Browning, but Browning was already in that space, so managed to get the pass into turn 1.
His initial launch was good, but he just lost a little bit out in that second phase, and that is where Luke Browning pounced. This is Zach Taylor a little bit further down the order, as they're all going to try and duck and weave to try and find their way up the order. 2 Elite Motorsports teammates here, Tom Leben and John Bennett, battling out for about 6th position on the outside of Agostini. Don't hit your teammate there. The 2 Chris Dittman racing cars as well were going side by side up towards Hamilton.
It seems like teammates on teammates here. They see they're still side by side working, not working together at all. Those Brandon Oxley and that is Mackenzie Cresswell, I believe. They've come together. So there's been a bit of movement in that midfield there. The 2 Douglas cars there sandwiched by yeah, it's a great racing in the first lap, very close. Someone just touching the curb there, by the looks of it, that could hamper their exit. That was Bryce Aaron.
I think Kean Shields as well were getting a little bit squeezed off, a little bit back in the pack, but it is at the moment though Callum Voisin leading from Luke Browning and from Joel Granfors. Straight after that start, I was thinking that Browning was going straight on the attack. However, Callum Voisin in the second phase of this lap has managed to bring himself back into this race a little bit, has managed to feel himself a little bit more comfortable, and it is Browning under pressure. Look at this from Granfors, 2 slightly different lines coming around Corham into Murray's to finish off the very first lap of 12 here in the opening race of the weekend, and it is at the moment the battle for second where our eyes are taken to. It's such a long run though down the centre straight, 815 metres, basically flat through T1 and then into Wilson. It is so tight, and that's Granfors looking for the move, isn't able to do it yet.
That was a bold move. I think he was just trying to scare Browning off the road, but that's actually hampered his exit, which means that Reese is now looking for the outside.
Just remember, these 2 made contact back in Donington Park, isn't able to get through though, and that's it. As soon as someone's tried to make a move, you've got to pounce straight away.
Absolutely. It's so tricky, because if you make a move, that can change your race and you can go forward, and especially when the 2 championship rivals, they'll be wanting to beat each other to those points because it's so close at the moment. But as you can see, if you don't commit to that move and you can't get it done in the first instance, then it can negatively affect you. And we can see Farrier actually now applying the pressure on the back of Reese as well.
Yes, indeed. Roberto Farrier, of course, one of the drivers that's been doing quite well in this championship, currently sits 4th in the standings and was part of that Carlin 1-2, of course, in the very first race. Oh, who was that who picked up? That must have been Browning that picked up a little bit of grass and dirt on the exit of Hamilton, which will make you struggle a little bit into August because you've got a bit of a dirty tyre into that tricky braking zone.
Yep, dusty round here. You can see offline that it's very sandy soil, and that does get in your tyres. If you drop a wheel on the exit, it does hamper you for the next 2 or 3 corners, which can leave you vulnerable.
Now, where do you go for a move around here? After the Bentley straight, which we're on now, it's about 800 metres. It's the second longest straight on here. The centre straight is longer, but both of them go into very fast corners. It's tricky to line a move. If it was into a long braking zone, then surely you'd be able to give it a go, but that's not the case around here. It's such a tricky one going through Brundle into Nelson.
Brundle into Nelson is a very technical section, fairly narrow, as the circuit's very wide down the main straight and then narrows down under the bridge. It's quite hard to make a move there. You really need an overlap before the braking zone to make it work. Otherwise, it's very, very high risk, and I don't believe any of these drivers at the front will be wanting to take any risks like that this early in the weekend. You can see some movement at the back.
Yeah, I think it was Javier Segura in the Carlin car, that really distinctive bright yellow one that you can see going side by side in the background. That'll be with John Bennett as they race their way down to turn one. Might actually be Alex Connor, but either way, there is a bit of side by side back there as Javier Segura is trying to rescue 7th position. So close here. This is 2nd place. This is Luke Browning in the silver car, and it is Joel Gramfors in the white and red Fortec. These are the top 2 in the championship, and at present they are separated by just a single point. We love seeing these two battle.
They've been battling a lot on circuit. They've always been right there. Potentially the 2 of the fastest drivers, most consistent fast drivers of the season, always being in the top 5 in the fast race, in the sort of the first couple of races. Seems like Gramfors does have the pace edge on Browning at the moment. He's able to keep very close up behind Browning, which is normally indicative that you've got a bit more pace, because you still do get a bit of aero wash around here with the turbulent air going over the front wing, meaning you've got a little bit less front grip.
I did get a note, by the way, from Nick Gilks. Apparently the car will not start, and that is why he's not been able to take to 13th on the grid. That is gutting. Obviously, you know, it's the first race of the weekend, still got a couple more, but still, that is a heartbreaking way to start here in Snetterton.
Voicing as well, looking very comfortable at the front. He's setting some consistent lap times. He was the fastest driver the last lap, comfortably 4.5 tenths quicker than even Browning. I don't know whether Browning's just easing his tyres in, maybe thinking the long game. Voicing, we know, has got the pace raw recently. He's definitely one of the men on form, with a race win at Donington last time out in the first race, and now potentially, oh, big slide from, that was a massive slide from Voicing there. I'm not sure if you caught that, but oh, that was, I thought he'd lost it. It was a very good save. You see how his lap time is after that.
It's a struggle with Coram, though, isn't it? The final corner, like you say, you're effectively flat. You do kind of breathe a little bit of the throttle, but when you do that, it just lets the rear end slide around a little bit as you're trying to line up for that very, very tricky braking zone at Murray's.
Voicing, last sector, was about 1.5 tenths, 2 tenths slower than Gramfors and Browning, so maybe that little slide didn't help him. It's interesting to see how the setups are going here, because some teams will be thinking, right, I want to be fast at the start. Potentially that's what Voicing's done with the nice high tyre pressures, get him out at the front, because if you can get away at the start and then pull a gap, that is often hard to pull back and then overtake. So he's got a second gap, so no DRS in this GB3, but he'd be outside that window as it stands. It'd be interesting to see how the pace ebbs and flows as the race goes on.
Well, Farrier, who is in 4th position at the moment, has set the fastest lap of the race as he closes down on this lot. So Matthew Reese had a moment, because Matthew Reese was in the top 5. He was in 4th position, wasn't he? Because he was attacking Joel Gramfors, and so has dropped back to 6th position. So not sure what's happened to the JHR Developments driver, but he has dropped off of the rear group. You can see here, looking off the back of Farrier, there is a sizable gap back to Tom Leben for Elite Motorsport. So clearly there has been some form of issue, of which there are quite a lot of corners around here where you can have a light mistake, still keep it going, but lose out a bit of time.
It's actually a very long lap round here, 4.7 kilometres, considering it doesn't take up a lot of land space, Snetterton Circuit. With that new 300 extension they put in about, was it 2012, I want to say? It was the early 2010s. It's actually made a long circuit. The middle sector really adds something to this circuit, because beforehand it was fairly oval shaped. It was a high speed challenge, and now it's added a bit of technicality to it. But Farrier really soldiering on. That group, 2nd, 3rd and 4th, very close there. The silver number 5 of Browning, followed by the red, white and yellow of Gramfors, and then the blue with the white highlights of Farrier. They're all very, very close there. Voicing, another quick lap there, setting fast lap after, well, he's not actually fastest lap, but he's setting faster sectors every time for himself. Who is the fastest on that last lap? Let's have a look. It was actually Gramfors in 3rd place as fast. So that group is coming together. Reese now looking at Leben. There must have been some sort of incident, potentially between Farrier or Reese, or maybe Reese made a mistake in his own. Shame that we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we have seen his car be fairly bulletproof, of course, after that massive incident at Donington Park and somehow managed to walk away from that incident perfectly fine. And by walk away, I mean the car was fine. I'm not talking about him getting out of the car. I mean the car continued in the race and he still finished quite well. He finished in 8th position now, despite basically in an incident that we both kind of felt that his wheel should not have been attached to the car. So clearly the car's all right. I wonder if, you know, like I say, he might have had a bit of a sideways, maybe a little bit of contact with Farrier and Granfalls, so that would be completely
conjecture.
Yeah, exactly.
You can see a front wing end plate on the exit of Williams there. So there's someone at some point has lost a front wing somewhere, maybe lower down the order. I would imagine either Tommy Smith or Zach Taylor, because they both seem like they're in the pits and they haven't continued, unfortunately. But this group here, I'm interested to see what's happened to Reese. Maybe we'll chat to him afterwards, because unfortunately we haven't caught it on the footage yet. But he was right up there, putting pressure on at the start of the race, and now he's dropped back a bit. He looks like he's being held up behind Levin. We know he's had great pace from qualifying. He was right up there until the dying moments. I spoke to some of the JHR team, and they were very disappointed because it seemed like...
Oh, he's had another one! He's had another one! He's gone straight on at the final corner at Murray's. That is Matthew Reese off the road behind Max Esterson. There looks like to be a car problem because he's not rejoining the circuit straight away, and he went straight on as well. He's surely coming back into the pit lane here. Matthew Reese, I was about to wonder about, like, you know, some of his results this season have been okay but not great, but Matthew Reese,
absolutely gutting.
That's got to be a car failure.
That's got to be a car failure. There, to go that far off there, you really have to make a huge mistake, unless... No, it's got to be a car. I don't know what's happened there, but it must be a car issue. Maybe that happened something similar to that before, potentially. Oh no, earlier on in the race when he dropped down. So yeah, we'll definitely catch up with the team and find out what happened after the race. We can bring you the updated story on that. But really disappointing for Reese, because he was so fast in testing. He was rapid on Thursday. He was, I think he led a couple of the sessions, and he's been up there in the top 3 or 4 in most sessions. And then, of course, in qualifying. Let's have a look. Let's read it at the start.
Yeah, this is a look back at the race start where we see Luke Browning getting that fantastic launch. Yeah, Brandon Oxley sent straight off into the grass, trying to make it side by side around the outside of Max Esterson, and would actually indeed complete that move. So a little bit dicey there on the grid, but when you've got 20 cars, I was going to say 22, we did actually end up having 20 cars on the race start. A couple of lockups there as James Headley would rejoin the race, but yeah, pretty dicey through the first sector, but once that's passed, everything's been fairly calm to a certain degree, with the exception of the Reese issue.
Yes, that is strange there, because Corum's not really a big braking zone. Not Corum, sorry, Murray's the last corner for Corum into Murray's. It's not really a long, hard braking zone, because you're turning and braking. It's quite a smooth transition from the throttle to the brake. As you can see, the cars wobble around there, but it's not a particularly fast corner, so to go that far off, I imagine there must have been an issue, and that was confirmed by the fact that he came in. So
yeah, straight away. And he wasn't accelerating like over the grass. He wasn't going anywhere. It was just like, it was as if the car had just shut off.
It looked like there was no urgency to get going again, so that normally indicates some sort of car issue that he couldn't continue. So really disappointing for Reese. Hopefully we'll see him back on full form in race number 2.
See if we can see it.
Oh, that looks really strange. It seemed like the throttle almost stayed on, because the front tyres were scrabbling for grip while the car pushed on. So unless there's a braking issue or the throttle sticking, then
it's odd though.
Very odd, very odd.
Yeah, that's definitely not right there. No, it's not. It's kind of one of those things that people kind of think is. I'd almost compare it in a sense to Brooklyn's. I don't know. I'm not too crazy, but in the sense of, like, people think that it's a really heavy braking zone, but the final corner at Murray's is not. You kind of you're balancing on it quite a lot on the way through the exit of Corum. It's
a really tricky sector, especially in these cars, to get right, because you are completely flat through Corum. It's really fast. You're probably doing 120, 25 miles an hour through there, completely flat, and then the car's fully loaded on the outside tyres. You're pretty much in the limiter of 5th or in 6th gear, and then you have to roll onto the brakes. And as a driver, you know that if you roll on the brakes, you lift off, the weight transfers onto those front wheels, and if you're still turning, that can cause the car to rotate. That we saw Voisin have that small issue earlier on in the race, and that rotation is something you do not want, because 1, you'll overheat your tyres, but 2, makes the braking point or the braking zone into Murray's very sketchy, which then is very hard for you to then get the perfect turn in and roll the speed through Murray's, and that very important exit onto the centre straight to finish the lap, because it's so long, 815 metres. If you have a poor exit out there, you're going slowly for a very long time.
And yeah, then the corner that meets it straight afterwards is Rich's, and then you're going for another few hundred metres down to the Wilson hairpin, so it's a long run. You're absolutely right. By the way, speaking of long runs, at the moment, Callum Voisin's long run of leading the race looks to be coming under a bit of pressure. Big moment there from Brandon Oxley, and now watch Nico Christodoulou as well in that Arden Motorsports. I know it doesn't look like an Arden, it looks like an Elite, but that black black and yellow machine directly behind the number 22. That is Christodoulou in his Arden machine, and he's trying to get around the outside of Brandon Oxley. It's going to be a little bit tight going into Riches, and decides to back out. But Callum Boyce is coming under a lot of pressure at the moment from Luke Browning and Yoel Granfors. Roberto Farrier is not quite close enough to add to the mix, but the top three are separated by 1 second.
Very, very close. 4 cars, 1 second. That's about as close as you can get in these, especially with this high speed. When I was over at the dummy grid as they were getting ready for the race, the wind definitely picked up a bit. You can see in the flags potentially in the race that there's a lot of crosswind kind of coming across, slight tailwind from the left hand side into the first corner, which can make it a bit sketchy through turn 1. You might have a bit of oversteer through there, and also the wind really affects, we've heard from Voice, and how the car feels around this circuit. It's very open, there's not much brakes from the wind, and if you have wind on the front of the car, you end up with a lot of grip, so the car can slow down on the exit, so you can carry a lot more speed in. Wind on the rear, and you carry a lot more speed in, which means might mean you need to brake earlier, or it can affect the balance of the car as well. So wind on the inside of the car in a corner, oversteer. If the wind is pushing from the outside, then you get understeer. So really something they need to think about, and that combined with the aero wash on the car in front is a lot to think about with how you're going to judge how much speed to carry. And then tricky sections like this where you can see braking and turning. You see Browning there, a little wobble as well, so they're working the tyres very hard. He's clearly pushing, as Granfors is now applying a lot of pressure onto Browning.
Roberto Farrier still holds the fastest lap of the race. I don't think that is changing any time soon, although to be fair, we're not a million miles away from it, currently running in 43.7, which is a few tenths off of the fastest lap that Roberto Farrier had set. Knowing how quickly, I know we've spoken about wind almost ad nauseum in this broadcast, but it is still a very good point, because it's one of those major things as Yoel Granfors looks to the inside of Luke Browning, doesn't manage to really send it in, just slightly differing lines coming into the Wilson hairpin. But did you ever look for like different references as you were driving around, like flags and stuff, when you were in the car? Because it changes on a lap to lap around here.
Absolutely, you will be looking for things. I don't know if it's still there now, but coming out of turn 3 Palmer, there's a windsock, like one of the ones you see on a motorway for lorries. There's a windsock, and I always used to use that as a reference when I was driving around here. I don't know whether the other drivers have spotted it. Flags are actually very difficult to use, because when you're traveling so fast, you often can't tell if they're coming towards you or away from you. Whereas that's why windsocks, of course, are used, because you can see from every angle where they're pointing. Does make a big difference.
You're all right, you're smart, you are. Either way, I won't insult you too much, not like I did last round. Either way, Callum Voisin is still leading the way. Luke Browning, Yoel Granfors, and then Roberto Farrier, your top 4, and they're not separated by very much as we're heading on to the final 3 laps of this race. There is plenty of opportunities to make a move, and then this is the battle for 5th position. Tom Leben and then John Bennett, Javier Segura, Alex Connor, who's inside the top 10 once again with Mackenzie Cresswell and Max Esterson inside that top 10. Esterson, who of course moved his way up in the championship last round into 3rd, will be bleeding quite a few points to the likes of Callum Voisin. I think he will lose that 3rd position in the championship, but to be fair, still it's another top 10. He's starting to get those results that we know they have the speed for. Had a run of 6 consecutive top 10 finishes before finishing in the lowest of lows of 11th place in the previous race of the season, so really continuing a great streak at the moment.
Yeah, that Douglas car, especially in the hands of Max Esterson, seems like they've been coming into a good bout of form. Unfortunately, not qualifying quite as high here at Snetterton as he would have hoped, and the pace at Donington and Silverstone would suggest, with him being right up there. But still top 10's good for the championship. He's still learning, his first year in the UK, so he's potentially never been to Snetterton before. I don't know what their testing program has been like, but it's a very technical circuit. There's a lot of differing lines, as we've seen between Browning. We saw that onboard lap before the race. He goes very deep into the Wilson or Montreal hairpin at turn 2. He goes very deep and cuts it back, whereas we've seen Granfors going a lot tighter there, maybe trying to pinch a bit more time in the start of the corner and sacrificing the exit. Might depend on the setup, the driver preference, maybe day to day as well. We've heard overnight that there was a bit of rain and the track seems to be a bit faster this morning, maybe washed that top layer of dust off or something like that.
Yeah, and obviously that means that the track is evolving all of the time because of obviously the wet weather that we had last night. Just changes things up ever so slightly, and in the race you've got to be super adaptive, not only to that but also again to the wind, to the conditions, to the temperature, to everything. You've got to be aware of that, and whilst you're all doing all that, you're trying to beat the guy that is directly ahead of you. It is not easy to race in GB3, but we're heading on to the penultimate lap of the race right now, and Callum Voisin is looking comfortable. He's under pressure, but he is soaking it up absolutely brilliantly at the moment, although the last lap time was a 43.0, so he's dropping back off about 0.3 off of his personal best, and across the line this time by, what is the gap difference? A 43.0 again, but it was 43.0s for Browning. Granfors did a 42.9 to close in a 10th. They are all closing in, but it's not by the amount that I'd be really concerned for Callum Voisin. I am for Luke Browning right now.
I think Voisin's fairly comfortable by the looks of it. His lap times have been very, very consistent. His previous laps, he did his best lap of the race, 42.7. The lap before was a 42.7. This lap just gone, 43.0. So he's lapping very consistently. I think he'd be comfortable with a half a second gap. He knows around here it's very difficult to throw a long dive bomb in. Agostini is about the only place you can throw it back from a fair distance, but half a second's a bit too much even. And he will know that it's Browning and Granfors behind. They don't want to get caught up in his battle. They're battling each other. They've got their own things to worry about. I think, assuming that he doesn't make a mistake now in these last couple of laps, Voisin's probably ready for, or in a prime position to take the race victory, unless Browning can unlock some pace out of somewhere. But it seems like Granfors is the one applying the pressure at the moment. He's probably got the best pace of all the drivers so far. He's been very quick in all sessions this weekend as well. He'll be looking to make a move on Browning, keep that pressure on, but we know that Luke is a very old hand. He's got a lot of experience, and a little bit of pressure won't force him off the track.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I'm actually surprised he's not been able to win since that first round of the season back in Alton Park, where he took that double. Hasn't won since, has been on the podium quite a few times. This would be his 6th podium of the season if he does end up finishing in this. But say, for example, you're Joel Granfors, you're a championship leader right now, you've got a single point lead. Are you feeling the pressure to try and force a move, to try and keep hold of that championship lead, or are you just kind of like, look, we'll let it slide for this one race, and then we'll come back a bit later on and attack you tomorrow?
I think the long game is always the best thing. While he is potentially relinquishing his championship lead of 1 point currently, he will be dropping just behind Browning in the standings. It's not by many points, so we're thinking about 4 points. He'll be 4 points behind Browning after this race if things stay as they are, which, of course, you always want as many points. You want to be at the head of the field, but he will know that if he can keep his consistency up, if he keeps banging in the results, eventually it'll toss and turn. Some rounds that Browning will be a bit faster, some rounds he will be faster, Yo will be faster. So I think he's probably better off to take the long game and think, right, this one, Luke, you've got me. He had a good start. If I come back in the next one, then we'll see how we go.
Well, we'll have to wait and see on that one, because Granfors is very close going into Agostini. Loses out a little bit there. Not too much in the form of dirty air for the likes of Agostini, but you do lose quite a bit coming through Oggies and then Williams onto the Bentley straight, which is obviously where you really want to be carrying the speed. He's very, very close right now, so he's taking quite a lot of that right now.
Yes, making the most of the tyres, taking as much out of them as he can to try and put some pressure on Browning. He'll try and get that move done if at all possible. Running, you can see how hard he's pushing there, running wide. 2 wheels on the dirt there. That shouldn't hurt him too much. Looks like he's got good exit. He's in the slipstream. This could be quite close going into Brundle and Nelson.
Yeah, of course, just finishing off the Bentley straight right now. 800 metres ticked off, and still Browning holds the advantage through Nelson. That's that one ticked off, and then through Bombhole. And like you say, you are basically pinned from this point through the compression all the way around Coram. Callum Voisin is well in control right now, has danced his way around the Snetterton circuit in brilliant fashion. And after that race victory in Donington Park, we are welcoming in the new Callum Voisin to the GB3 Championships. He takes yet another win. It's his 2nd one of the season. Callum Voisin's on top for Carlin, Luke Browning behind, and Joel Granfors in 3rd, as it's Roberto Farrier in 4th place. Tom Leben will come across the line in 5th, just ahead of his teammate, and by just, I mean just, only a 10th between the two of them, as Bennett crosses the line in 6th place. Segura, Connor, Cresswell and Max Esterson.
That is our top 10. A good race. Most of the action at the start, as we've seen with the GB3, it's quite hard to follow. It's a great win. Voisin now on the same number of wins as Browning in the championship, which shows how important consistency is.
Absolutely incredible, and of course has more wins now than Joel Granfors, who has just a single one. Of course, Grundtvig comes across the line, the driver that will be starting the 3rd race of the weekend tomorrow from the reverse grid pole, but that'll be in a little while. We'll focus on the actual here and now as Callum Voisin takes the victory, and a superb victory it was. Completely dominant. Did lose a little bit of time in the middle of the race, just a touch there, but did manage to find the speed once again and managed to bring himself back to the checkered flag in race victory standings once again. Of course, backing up that race victory that he had in Donington Park, only finished in 7th place in the second race at Donington Park, but was actually challenging for the race lead. It was a couple of mistakes going through the old hairpin that really cost him that day. But we could be looking, I mean, realistically, considering the speed that he had, we could have been looking at a 3-time race winner in the GB3 Championship of 2022. Either way, it'll just have to be 2, as Callum Voisin has taken victory once again. Luke Browning behind, Joel Granfors and Roberto Faria in 4th position, with Tom Leben, Luke Bennett for Elite Motorsports doing quite well in 5th and 6th, Javier Segura and Alex Connor Mackenzie Cresswell and Max Esterson rounding out the top 10. And of course, 4th position, Roberto Faria takes his 2nd fastest lap of the season. Behind this, Bryce Aaron will finish in the 11th position. Of course, a race winner already this season. That was in the previous race of the championship back in Donington Park. Brandon Oxley in 12th place with Nico Christodoulou recording another finish as he's trying to make headway and will start from well inside the top 10 in the next race. Kean Shields from 14th, Marcus Flack, James Headley, Mikkel Grundtvig, Morales and Reese. Of course, Morales having a bit of issues later on. Reese definitely retiring from the race. Smith and Taylor retiring in the very early stage of the race, and Nick Gilks unfortunately was not able to take to the start after engine problems, but will start tomorrow from 11th position. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. There is some more positive form coming in from the Hill Speed camp. Coming into the Parc Fermé, of course, Callum Voisin after another victory, and we'll be able to catch up with him after this. Absolutely super stuff from Callum Voisin. Just so in control, despite having that moment, shall we say, going through Coram, was just pretty comfortable outside of that, soaked up all the pressure being dealt by the 2 championship rivals of Luke Browning and Joel Granfors. I do wonder how much that kind of probably doesn't play into the shot, into the mindset of Callum Voisin, but I do kind of wonder if ever you're behind the wheel, you're obviously trying to get yourself back into championship contention, and you've got the 2 championship rivals directly behind you also fighting for that. Indeed, it is a little extra pressure when you kind of think, right, I want to take this victory because I want to get myself back involved, but I've got to worry about those 2 that are probably going to maybe take a couple of risks, extra risks, to throw down the inside and try and make a move, because they're battling for their championship more so than anything else. And we can see a little bit of John Jackson and Piers Pryor sneaking their way into the post-race celebrations, as we can see John Jackson.
Yeah,
we'll throw
down here in Parc Fermé, where obviously the drivers just being congratulated by their friends and family. Callum, congratulations. Where we talked about how you'd start from pole and you would just try and stay there and continue that race, and for you that's exactly what happened. How was it out there for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite tricky actually. I mean, I know I led the whole race, but Luke behind was extremely quick, and to be honest, like I was having to look in my mirrors quite a bit because yeah, he was extremely quick. But it was just trying to maintain that gap, which thankfully I did, and yeah, managed to bring it home.
Having someone like Luke behind you, does that actually help you? Because if there was a bit more of a gap, perhaps mistakes would happen because you'd switch off slightly. But having someone as quick as Luke behind you must G you up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's always nice to beat your opponents. I mean, especially Luke is, I think, leading the championship now. So I mean, it's definitely a confidence booster. But I mean, probably a bigger gap would have been nicer, but you can't have everything.
There we go, Callum Voisin winning there for Carlin, and you'll be on pole position for the first race tomorrow as well. No, 5th place. Sorry, my memory is terrible. Congratulations on this win, getting you right up into the championship mix, and we'll chat to you again tomorrow, I'm sure. Callum Voisin there, driving for Carlin. We come over to Luke Browning, the new championship leader. Yeah. You were 1 point behind before we started the race, but not a bad race for you, making up that position very early on.
Yeah, exactly. That was lovely. Nice start off the second row. It just really felt like a good launch. And yeah, I think it's just so difficult to follow around here. Every time I slightly caught him, it was just the wash, and then I dropped back another 2/10 in one corner, and I felt like when I backed off a little bit at the start, I caught him quite quickly again. But I mean, he drove a brilliant race. Not many mistakes in his race run, and yeah, valid winner.
In terms of the wind here, we were discussing this just before the show, is the wind a problem here? Because it seems like 1 minute it's quite gusty and the next minute it's quite calm.
It's very car dependent. sometimes the wind, for example, helps you out if you've got slightly understeer balance. You've got a bit of a tailwind into T1, so that might help you out if you've got a little bit of understeer. But on the contrary, when you really need that front coming onto the back straight, you're going to struggle. So yeah, it's very car dependent, and I think it's been, like we've mentioned in the past, this new F3 car brings in so many different philosophies, and yeah, it's really interesting to see how they all work, because I think there's definitely a few people on some different things.
I'd imagine so. Luke Browning, new championship leader, congratulations, driving for High Tech there. We're going to have to go over to Joel Granfors here. First of all, how was your birthday yesterday?
It was good, calm, just like it.
You're a bit busy in the car, I guess. Coming third there, very good for you. You have been overtaken by Luke, obviously coming into this with a 1-point lead in the championship. But Roberto was quite close to you there in 4th place.
Yeah, I mean, the poor start from my side, lost out to Luke, and then felt like I had a good pace, so it felt like it was pretty slow, I think. I don't know if it was Luke who was stuck behind the column, or it was just Luke who had a bit, struggling a bit with the pace, but was just stuck behind him. Tried a few tries on getting past in turn 1 and turn 2 especially, so that didn't work.
What have you learned for the second and third races in terms of what you'll need to do to make up more places?
Well, first off, don't lose it in the start. So but I was just try and be as close as possible to get him to make a mistake. That's what I tried with Luke, but it didn't come. So
hey, look, best of luck next time. Joel Granfors there, your 3rd place driver, driving for Fortec, 2nd in the championship. Now very close between him and Luke, but obviously a whole host of drivers very close at the top of the championship, and it's only going to get closer as the season goes on. And it's time to go over now to the podium with Lewis McGlade.
Wow, again, great to catch up with the driver. I always say it, but it is always indeed true. We'll see them march their way onto the podium, and those 3 will now become the top 3 in the championship as well. Callum Voisin moving his way up into 3rd, and then of course the top 2 in the championship in Luke Browning and Joel Granfors separated now by 4 points, with the advantage heading to Luke Browning by 4 points. It's another time they've shared the podium. In fact, it is the 5th time this season that we'll see the pair of them being Joel Granfors and Luke Browning onto the podium. Just shows how consistent they've been all season, separated by just a single position in the last 3 races of the championship, and all of those points advantage actually going the way of Luke Browning. Just shows how strong he's been so far in 2022. Started out the season in the best possible way, but a couple of hiccups along the way, including that retirement at Alton Park, and then issues at Silverstone, the retirement at Donington Park to open the round there at Donington Park. Kind of just struggled to get himself a couple of points in those races. Meanwhile, Joel Granfors was ticking off a couple consistent. I mean, the 2, when you look at their results, they are separated by absolutely nothing. But there is the concern in a championship that sometimes you focus too much on the 1 or 2 rivals, that sometimes you forget about the others, and I would not rule out Callum Voisin in the championship challenge. Joel Granfors, who came into the round as the championship leader, will lose that, but still gains himself another podium in the season as he'll take 3rd position. Luke Browning will take to the 2nd step, of course, for High Tech Grand Prix. And then all of Carlin will be happy for the first race of the weekend once again, as Callum Voisin will take to the top step for the 2nd time this season. Obviously, major congratulations from all of the rivals, but these 3, keep your eye on these 3 names, because I genuinely do believe that these 3 could well be our proper championship rivals when we reach our season finale, when we head to Donington Park in October. Who knows what's possible? Always when it comes to young talent, who knows what's possible. Tomorrow, Luke Browning will start this race from pole position, by the way, alongside Joel Granfors. Callum Voisin struggling a little bit in qualifying on the 2nd fastest lap, so he'll actually be starting from 5th position. But the thing is it's not just about qualifying, it's not just about starting order, it is about the pace that you show throughout the race. And Callum Voisin's pace there was certainly strong enough to potentially challenge for another podium, in the same way the likes of Luke Browning. Remember that Browning started from 3rd position, managed to outstart. It was that 2nd phase of the start that worked in favour of the Cheshire-born driver, as he managed to get straight down the inside of Joel Granfors and was able to take over 2nd position. And then again, the championship lead. Not only was it fastest lap from Roberto Faria, it was also the 2nd consecutive fastest lap for Roberto Faria, but you don't want to hear me talk about that, you want to hear it from Alex Connor, because John Jackson is standing by.
Thanks, Lewis. I'm here outside Arden with Alex Connor. 8th place finish, 7th place start, dropped a place. I mean, it's very competitive out there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's close. I mean, qualifying, I think the top 15 were within a second, so it's close. Everyone's quick. I think I just got a pretty bad start, or the two behind me got a really good start, one or the other. Don't know yet, but I mean that's I think the pace was there, just saving tyres mid-race, and then once I saw they were battling, just picked up the pace a bit and tried to catch back up, but it wasn't enough.
We're just going to have to move forward slightly because we're about to get run over by a recovery truck here for David, who's it's not the way you want to come back to the garage, I wouldn't imagine. David Morales there. In terms of what you've learnt from being out there this first time, obviously the first time the GB3 cars gone round this year, what have you learnt that you can take from that into the second race and the third race?
Well, I think now we know what the racing's like. I think we can do more with our setup. I think with what we chose there was quite good, but I think obviously there's still a bit more to be made just on the racing side. But I think now that we've got a good quality car now, so it's just about putting laps together and getting lucky, I guess.
In terms of being a driver, by the way, obviously having Nico, who I believe may be doing maybe the whole season now, and obviously it was his first race last time out at Donington. Is that useful because the more cars you've got, the more data you get? I believe that that just helps the team push forward with everything you're sort of aiming towards.
Yeah, I mean everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, and I think obviously having more teammates is better because you can learn off them, which is good, and make each other quicker. I think that's really helped with Nico being here. He's quick, so I mean it's always good. Pushes each other, and yeah.
Excellent stuff, Alex. We'll chat with you again, and hopefully it'll be making up a place next time instead of losing a place. Alex Connor there, 8th place today with Arden Motorsport. We're going to do a bit of a walk and talk now, see who else we can find. We can see Piers Pryor here waving at me. In fact, we've just got to wait for the recovery truck here with David Morales' car. In fact, just try not to get a cameraman run over. It's probably not the best way to end this stream today. Can't really see what the damage, the amount of damage is. I think Piers Pryor is going to come round. Piers, in terms of the damage to this car, can you actually see what the damage is?
No, I didn't have a look. It looks like the front is out somewhere. So there's obviously been some contact at the front. Potentially the steering arms are broken. If it is steering column, that's quite a big job for the guys to turn around in what is fairly short turnaround today. But I'm sure they'll get it sorted. Obviously, Dave will be understandably disappointed with that, but it's just the racing goes, isn't it? It's nice. It's always very tight on the first few laps.
Yeah, well, obviously they do have overnight to do it with the GB3, having only one race today. No, sorry, having only one race today. If this was to happen tomorrow, that would be a kind of job where there may be a risk of him driving in the second race?
Yeah, sorry, I got the GB4 and the GB3 mixed up. Yeah, overnight it'll be absolutely fine, but if you do have a short turnaround, then some of the jobs do take a while. They've got plenty of mechanics to just jump in the car, but they don't want to be working rush because these cars are fast. You want to make sure everything's right, so if rushing things, that's when mistakes happen. It's a disappointment for David. Also, massive disappointment for Matthew Reese as well, not coming off there. I'm not sure if you've spoken about that. I've had to run round, but
I haven't yet. No, we would like to chat to more drivers. However, we're literally boxed in by this car being recovered, so it's fine. We can talk about Matthew Reese. Very, very quick in the qualifying, but just disappointing. You couldn't quite get on pole there. And we were talking, and we're actually going to talk to Matthew and his driver coach Callan about the importance of having a teammate. I just discussed that there briefly with Alex Connor. Having 3 drivers for Arden now, they're getting so much more data. Matthew Reese is struggling because he's on his own. He's out there with JHR, but he doesn't have a teammate also giving data which they can learn from.
He's doing excellently because he is on his own, and basically all the data that he uses is his own, so he's only got to go off himself. The teams don't share data, that's very much their intellectual property. If he had a teammate, we were discussing this with Callan earlier on, hopefully we'll chat to Matthew as well, but if you've got a teammate, no driver is perfect everywhere. Even if you're generally faster than your teammate, you're not going to be faster in every corner. So if you're just looking at your own data, you don't know where you can go faster, you don't know how you can get that time, whereas oftentimes, one driver will be faster in turn 1 and 2, and then someone else faster in 3 and 4, and you can then hopefully adapt your driving so you get the best parts of all the different drivers, or get closer towards that throughout the lap, and that's where the lap time comes from, is making sure that you're chipping away at every single corner. There's a lot of turns around this track. I think there's 16, 17, something like that. So think about it. If you do 100th a corner, that's just 1.7 tenths, which that'd have been a couple of rows in quali.
Yeah, we're hearing it's the front left suspension on David Morales' car there that's got the problem there. So if it's just the suspension, that's not too difficult for them to fix.
No, there's parts that are designed. I say designed. They're not designed to break.
They're breakables.
Effectively, they're almost consumable. They bolt on the outside of the chassis. As long as none of the parts have gone through and punctured anything, then it should be fine. It didn't look too damaged, so disappointing, but no lasting damage.
I remember back when Nick Gilks had a radiator issue where something had come up off the road and smash into the radiator, and that was a big job. And I'm amazed at how quickly they can turn things like that around. So obviously, it'd be good for David to know that that is a small job that should be fixed overnight. I'm going to try and get out of this little situation we've got ourselves into. We can go around the recovery truck here. I don't know whether any other drivers are going to be around for us now, because and obviously the truck moves as we move. That's that's fantastic here. Yeah, let's have a chat with David Morales if we can get him. It's one of those ones where you wait for it, you wait for it, you wait for it, you go around it, it then moves. It's fine. David, what happened out there? We were sort of speculating, but it's good to hear it from your mouth.
So, you know, I don't really know myself. It's starting off from the first lap. I kind of felt like the steering was starting to bend, and then lap by lap by lap, it ended up just getting worse and worse until it was practically halfway, and then it popped and I went off.
Yeah, and there's not really much you can do with that.
No.
In terms of the actual, we were just discussing this, myself and Piers, we were just discussing, it's not something that's too serious for the mechanics to turn around.
No, definitely not something too serious, but in it happening during the race and where it happened, especially T10, there's nowhere else for me to go.
I guess one of the positives is seeing that Alex did have some good pace there and finished in a good position, so that must be reassuring for you for the races tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely 100% shows that the setup is there, the pace is there, and we can pull it together and finish well in one race. So that's the goal.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll chat to you under better circumstances, David. Thank you very much. David Morales there with Arden. Let's have a look here. I don't think we're going to see anyone else, actually, Piers. So, just sum up that race there. It wasn't the most eventful race in terms of the people that retired. It wasn't really through contact so much. I mean, Tommy Smith looked like he lost a nose cone there. Just a few mechanical problems. But, it looks like they're all very quick out there. Not a lot of overtaking. Is it tough to overtake here?
It is tough to overtake. I think it's exacerbated by the fact that the margins are so fine. We saw in qualifying, a couple of hundredths would have taken you a couple of places, and they're all so close. So you need a mistake, you need a big error to be able to make a move. And if the drivers are driving well and they're not making those mistakes, it's very hard to get close enough to make them overtake. We saw Granfuss right up the back of Luke Browning for most of that race. Couldn't affect a pass. We saw at some points Farrier was on the back and then he dropped back, and so there was a bit of ebbing and flowing with the pace throughout the race, which hopefully will give us some entertaining racing tomorrow. But yeah, very close racing, great to see. The start is basically all where it happens. That's where Browning got ahead of Granfuss as well, so it shows that the start is very important still.
And obviously the cars did sit on the grid for quite a long time there while they recovered the elite car, and also for Nick Gilks, who we saw his fantastic new race helmet. Didn't even get anywhere there, so very disappointing for him as well. When the cars are sat on the grid for so long, I was with some of the chief engineers, and they were saying they were not happy at all about how long they were sat there. I mean, how risky is that in terms of burning out an engine or burning out other parts of the car?
That's exactly it. It's the engines. These engines aren't designed to idle. They're not designed to sit there ticking over. They haven't really got enough cooling to be able to sit on their own with the engine running. They're designed to be travelling 100, 125 miles an hour, and that air thing rammed through the side pods that you can see with the radiators in. That's what cools them. So you'll see that some of the drivers will switch their engines off. They sat there for more than a minute or so. You'll see the rear light blinking really fast. That's a safety measure for the starts in case they stall. But they'll flip them off to hopefully maintain their engine temperature. They don't go too high, because you go too high, you get water boiling over. You get sometimes, I think in the electronics, they have sort of a limp home mode. If it gets too high, the engine power will get reduced. The rev limit will get reduced. So the engine protects itself because they don't want to eat themselves. So definitely something to consider. Fortunately, the situation at the start of the race with drivers not being able to start, and they had to remove Headley's car. Was it Headley? It was Headley's car.
It was Headley, yeah. He was pushed down into the pit lane there.
Yeah, had to remove Headley's car, so they obviously waited for that because they don't want any safety issues. But something to think about, but it seemed like everyone got on okay. That they will cool down as soon as they started moving, and luckily no more engine reliability issues from that.
Yeah, very, very cool day. I don't know where the summer went. Maybe we've had the summer already. But anyway, we're back with more action shortly. GB4 will be back live from about 3:15 for more action there as we actually go into second half of the season in the GB4 Championship. This is where it all started back here at Snetterton earlier in the year, and we'll see how it goes as the second half of the season in the GB4 Championship starts at 3:15.